I'm walking down Grosvenor Square.
Hello and welcome to Strangers Stopping Strangers, podcast number 26. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Welcome back to anyone who's returning, and thanks for stopping by and anyone who's new this week. So on the podcast this week, I get to talk to Jeff Rosen, and we had so much fun, lots of laughs. Jeff and I met when I was out in California over the holidays through mutual friends, Kat and Morgan, who connected us in hopes for me to get some tickets to see Stu Allen from the Mars Hotel for New Year's Eve. And Jeff was able to do that, and we just had so much fun. And, we stayed in touch, and I asked if he'd like to share his story on the podcast, and he did. So this was a great time. We talk about how he got into the music and lots of really cool East Coast shows, a special tiny little concert in a Telluride back in '87. And then he ultimately made his way out to California. So I hope you all enjoy hearing his wonderful music picks and great stories. A little sidebar note, the recording, it's better than it's been. It's still not quite up to par with where I want it to be in terms of quality of the recording of the conversation. And I finally figured out the culprit was my ancient computer and the whirring in the background. So I am looking at a new computer, a new laptop investment for you listeners for a higher quality experience. And that's something for us to look forward to. So thank you everyone for tuning in. If you are looking for any of the back episodes, you can check them out on the website, www.strangersstoppingstrangers.com. And as always, thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you soon.
Well, Jeff, thank you for joining me on Strangers Stopping Strangers.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, this is so fun, and thank you for hooking me and my sister up on New Year's Eve. We had just so much fun seeing Stu at your dinner and show. That it couldn't have been a better way to ring in the new year. That was so much fun.
It was great to be able to hook you up. That show sold out in 24 hours, so a small venue, and out here in the Bay Area, Stu Allen is very popular, so glad it all worked out.
Oh, it was so much fun. Well, you had told me a little bit. I want to talk about your experience with Deadhead, but tell everyone, especially for those in the Bay Area that are listening, a little bit about what you do with the producing the dinner and the shows, because that was so much fun.
Yeah, I'm a longtime chef. I've done all my life. A longtime Deadhead and music fan, and at some point a few years ago, when pop-up restaurants and house concerts were coming to rave, we thought, why not combine them into, a dinner and a show, a pop-up restaurant meets a house concert. So we've been doing it about 5 years now, typically at our house in Oakland, where we live. It's called the Moss House, and it's a old 1907 place with a lot of character, and it's kind of funky and fun, and it's not like fancy, but for Deadheads, it's comfortable and welcoming, and it's got great sightlines for a show. And so we've done about 35 of these things, and people find out through social media. They get an invite, and they pay a ticket, and then they get a big spread of food from myself, and then 2 sets of great music. So it's something that is more of a passion than a business. I am a chef. I have a business, catering and events, but it's something that we just love to do, and we love to have musicians over and take good care of them and take care of the fans.
It was very warm and welcoming and fun, so I feel really lucky to have gotten a chance to experience it. We got to meet, and here we are, so all good. And we met through Morgan, so a little shout out to Morgan who used to work with you. So hey Morgan.
Hey Morgan Wright, how you doing?
How you doing, Morgan Wright? Pat Wright listening today. So there you go. Thank you. So let's get back to the beginning. you're an East Coast guy. When we talked on the phone, we talked about the reverse East Coast West Coast transplant, and I selected some songs for you. Or you selected some songs that I downloaded that we're going to kind of go through some of the stories. But tell me a little bit about the beginning, and then we'll get into the first song that goes back to 1980.
Sure. Well, first time, I grew up in New York, and the first time I'd ever, heard about the Grateful Dead or seen anything about the Grateful Dead was when I was 14 in 1978 or so. My friend's mom, for the holidays, for Hanukkah, gave him Steal Your Face. And the Grateful Dead, Steal Your Face. And we're looking at it, and we're like, what is this? This like weird. It looks like it's going to be like crazy, weird, funky stuff. We didn't really get it, so we put it on the turntable. It's an album, of course. And we put it on the turntable, and it's a bunch of cowboy music, like country music. It almost seemed like to us, 14-year-olds, and I really kind of liked it. And so I just knew about it, and we'd hear the Grateful Dead and hear music on the radio, usually, Uncle John's Band or something like that. But 1980, they were coming Radio City Music Hall to put on that big run of shows. I was 16 years old. And I'm going to go see the Grateful Dead. And a bunch of us were at that age where we lived right outside New York City. And New York City was, a big playground waiting to be explored. And we were going to go do that and then go see the Grateful Dead. And so we had friends that waited online, got tickets, and I got to see, 4 nights at Radio City Music Hall. And we had pretty good seats. And as a young 16-year-old budding music fan, budding Deadhead, I got my mind blown that night. And I particularly loved the acoustic sets that came along. This is my first live Grateful Dead experience. To me, I'm like, oh, they always play acoustic sets. But little did I know later that was a very special run of shows, just like they did in the Warfield and the Sanger Theater in New Orleans. But Birdsong became my first favorite Grateful Dead song live, and they had played that a couple of nights, but that Halloween show was particularly memorable, and that made it on to their live album Reckoning, and just a very special song, lyrically, vocally, the little space that they go into. I was hooked. I heard that song and I was hooked.
Right on. Well, let's play it. So I'm gonna play the download, and this was from Halloween. And gosh, seeing them on a holiday always was just, it was extra special. New Year's Eve or Halloween or Mardi Gras or 4th of July. And, nobody could put on a party like the Grateful Dead did. If you were gonna celebrate, that was it. That was the way to go. So I love that this is on Halloween.
We had a great time. Lots of people dressed up. People always dress up at shows anyway, but Halloween, a little extra effort is made, and it was great.
Very fun. Do you remember what you wore? Did you dress up?
You know what? I did not. Because 16-year-olds, we're very.
You're too cool. Yeah,
we're
you're
too cool.
At 16, you're too cool to dress up. You're not a kid, and you're not a grown-up that can make fun of yourself. So at 16, you're just way too cool for a costume. I agree with that.
Yeah, but I did later. Later at Halloween's I would, but not that first one.
No. Again, at 16, you're not a kid anymore. So you're not a kid anymore. I am not putting on a goddamn costume. Maybe a tie-dye shirt. So right on. Well, let's go into that, and then we're gonna go a little bit further along your journey. So everybody enjoy.
I'll show you
listening to Birdsong, and I love that song too. It's such a beautiful song, and you're right. I mean, the lyrics, the meaning. I mean, written for lovely Janice. I mean, it's so special.
It's a special song, and hear it played live acoustically by the full band. I mean, not something that's too common.
Well, you know what I always think is really interesting, too, when I talk to deadheads about, like, especially people who've loved the music for so long, how the same songs will kind of change meanings as your life goes on. Like, the lyrics are the same, but as your life changes, things, will affect you differently, and you'll think about them differently. And when I saw the Dead & Company last summer at Fenway, they played Birdsong, and I couldn't help but feel like they were playing it for Jerry. And I don't know, like, it was just my interpretation of things. Like, I know it was written for Janice, but it just had that, I had that feeling in the air for me. I don't know.
I hear Birdsong, and I just, I think of good friends that aren't with me. And they may not have passed on, but they're just not with me at that moment. And I know the song was written for Janice, but I never really, thought of her during the song. But I agree, later on, when Dead & Company would play it and they would play that certain songs, even obviously he's gone, but really it was for Jerry.
Yeah, no, I thought about that because they played "He's Gone." I think on the same set, and then and Donna was playing it too. And then I thought about the story behind "He's Gone" and with Mickey's father. Then I was.
Right.
I mean, that's just mind-blowing to think, that could go down and you'd write the song and that you'd be playing it all these years later. It's pretty cool.
And now it's completely different. That was written for Lenny Hart, but it's taken on completely different meaning now. It's kind of a tribute to people, friends, family, colleagues who've passed.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love when people pull out little handles. Like, I've met so many people through social media. I mean, you're one of the few people I haven't met that way. And I always think about a guy that I tweet to whose name is Dogs in a Pile every time I hear "He's Gone." And it's just such a cool little innocuous lyric to to pull out as your handle on things, And I don't know. That's always the lyric that stands out for me. And I always think about this dude or girl. I don't even know if it's a man or a woman. It's just dogs in a pile that I communicate with out there in the cyber world.
That resonates with me. I have 4 dogs.
I have 3. Well, that's it too. And every time I take a picture of my 3 dogs together, I always label it "Dogs in a Pile" because they're always all sitting together in like a little cuddle formation. And I can't get enough of that lyric.
Nothing left to do but smile, smile, smile.
You got it. Well, so let's go. We're in the 80s. We're on the East Coast, but we've now left New York. So tell me a little bit about what's next on the journey.
Well, being a New Yorker, getting ready for college, I went to Syracuse University my freshman year, and that's what we call there's the Borscht Belt up there with the Catskills. Well, there's a Grateful Dead belt up there too of upstate New York, going into New England of towns that the Dead played in. And by the time I had gone to college at Syracuse, I knew what those towns were in those shows, and I'm not bragging when I say this, but I made it through my entire freshman year of college with a 1.5 GPA because I never going to class, only showing up for the tests because I was on tour.
Right.
So that's basically how I spent my freshman year. So I hope my parents aren't listening. But
not a bad thing. It reminds me of a friend of mine. I know you live in Northern California, who went to Chico. Who, hey Sam Ham, if you ever listen, who is a liquor salesman. And when he and I first sat down to talk, and Chico was just so famous for being the biggest party school in the 80s, and he kind of like threw it down and was like, "So I went to Chico." Pause. It was like in 1984. Like as if someone said, like, I have a Stanford medical degree, or I went to Harvard Law. So you can be like, I was in upstate New York in the 80s. I'm a deadhead. Pause.
All you need to know. Well,
that's all you need to know.
Syracuse was a bustling town of deadheads. I mean, they had kind of restaurant and bar on Marshall Street, the main little area. A bar called Hungry Charlie's that was very well known as a deadhead hangout. They play Grateful Dead all the time, at a time when not a lot of people were doing that. And they had access to a lot of tapes, and a few soundboards that would make their way there. So that was a lot of fun. And I used Syracuse, even though that Syracuse is a party school too. I didn't know because I was on tour. I left. But one of the shows that we went to that one year I was at Syracuse was Binghamton, New York. I think it was April 1983, Broome County Arena, and that was an incredibly memorable show. We got loaded up in a car with some friends who were new friends then, but they're still my friends now. One of them, I'll give a shout out to Mitch Stein, who I met in college. He's a big musician out here, big player with Stu and other bands. Plays with Keystone Revisited, with Tony Saunders and Bill Vitt. So it was really a great time. And what made that show so memorable, I mean, it was really a great road trip, just down the highway from Syracuse. But Binghamton, New York had no idea what was going to hit them. It really gave us a feel like there were news crews there. There weren't a lot of people that showed up without a ticket, but people were really curious. Like, who are you people? These deadheads. They're. You guys are like living in the '60s or something. I mean, I had a news reporter actually ask me that question. You guys are all young, but you're like living hippie life. Like, they didn't understand anything about it. And I thought that was just like so cool. And this was a time, it was a little bit of an innocent time before the In the Dark craziness came out. I mean, the Deadhead credo, you go to a show, you do your thing. You don't like camp out in front of the place for days. You go somewhere else, and then you leave the place better than when you found it. So, like the circus came to town and left, and what was that? No one even knew. There's no sign, no trace when they left town.
Yeah, 1983, I mean, the early 80s are kind of, it probably is kind of the, imagine like the late 70s and early 80s are kind of like almost an insider time, It was like after the 70s, but before the In the Dark, when a lot of people, new generations, waves of generations that joined, and I imagine, at that time it was like a more intimate footprint.
It was for me, and obviously, the Deadheads who came before me, following them in the early 70s, I mean, that was a completely different situation, and this was my time. This was when I was a teenager, early 20s, coming into the scene and the family, and that's what got me into the Grateful Dead too. Not just the music, but the alternate family and alternate community, which was thriving and was wonderful for me to make entry into. But that was my prime time, that early 80s, to tour and see the band, and that Broome County Arena show kind of launched me into making sure that I called the Dead Hotline, made sure I heard what the shows were, got my tickets for the tour in advance, and I started touring.
Right on. Well, that is very cool. I love hearing this because I'm imagining that time and those people and again that generation and I love putting myself into again different chunks of time because with a 30-year span, I mean there are so many different. I mean even within the Grateful Dead 30-year span of the incarnation of that band, there are so many chapters in that story.
Absolutely.
Very cool. So what you selected, we did not, you selected, I am downloading, but you selected Lost Sailor and To Save the Circumstance. So this is right after, this is Go to Heaven's fairly new, and so this is like the hot new shit at the time.
Yeah, I hadn't really been hearing it, then the Dead tapes and the music that I would listen to, and, I love Jerry Garcia, but I also love Bob Weir. And this song to me highlighted all the good things about Bob Weir and his singing style and his partnership with John Barlow. I mean, the songwriting, the dissonance, it really just Lost Sailor just took me and took me on its journey. And then ending with Saint of Circumstance, which we would just dance our asses off once that came on.
Well, what I usually try to do is do on a longer song, like a shorter version, but I think this podcast is going to run over a little bit because I just can't split that up. You can't, I can't do part and not do all. So on the other tracks, I'll do my, 3 to 5 minute versions of them. And then, of course, we have the companion only listening guide that's attached to the website for people who want the full version. But, we're going to just go throw caution to the wind and we'll do the whole thing because I wouldn't know where to edit, right? I don't know. You can't edit that with 2 songs.
Well put. Go for it.
Uneditable. So anybody who does not want to hear a full Lost Sailor in To Save the Circumstance, you can kindly fast forward like 10 minutes at this point because we're gonna play the whole fucking thing, and then we'll do the smaller chunks of the other songs. So I love this song too. This sequence, and so let's go into it, and then we'll be back.
Crumple's car is spinning. Helmet swinging to and fro. Ooh, where's the dog star? Ooh, where's the moon? I say been way too long, it seems. Some days the gales are howling. Some days the sea still is glass. Reef the mainsail. Lash the mast. I sail. Been way too long, it seems. Now the shoreline beckon, there's a price for being free. Where the seabirds cry, there's a ghost wind blowing. It's calling you to that misty, swirling sea. Feel the chains of your dreams are broken. No place in this world you can be. I say been way too long, it seems. On a shoreline beckon, there's a price for being when a big tall stop in. Freedom come easy. Freedom always come for freedom. never be. Maybe a face you've never seen. You can hear them calling on you. Yeah. Chasing dreams, living on the wind now, like the dust that blows around, the rain falling down. Maybe no one never knows, no. That could be heaven, 'cause here the rainbow is. This ain't the real thing. We'll close it down and pretend. But when the wind blows, when the nights are about to fall, you can hear the stars call. So set it on the side. With the rain falling down now, rain falling down now, rain falling down. Just repeat increasing, but I'll pull through. And there could be no road now. No, I don't know what the weather might do. Yeah, which way one need a dark star shine. No time for me. No time for me. So I'm sure that I can dance, sing in circumstance, tiger in a trance, with the rain falling down, 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 rain falling down. show. So we just see which way she blows. I sure don't know what I'm going for. Just a little of the time to say, I'm gonna go on it for show. Got to go for it anyway now. I sure don't know what I'm going for. Just don't, never know. I'm gonna go on it for show. Got to go. I sure don't know what I'm going for. So now how about you? Hey, I'm gonna go on it for show. Just exactly what the fuck you gonna do now? I sure don't know what I'm gonna do. Really gonna agree? Yeah, I'm gonna go on it for show. Really gonna agree? Really gonna agree?
Well, back from listening to Saint of Circumstance, Lost Sailor into Saint of Circumstance, and now we're going to leave New York and go a little bit, we're still in the Northeast, a little bit down the journey, so tell me a little bit about your next show.
Well, you know, being the East Coast Deadhead, you know, summer tour, always spring tour, fall tour, there was always stuff going on the East Coast, and that Broome County Arena and Binghamton show set me off on tour. 84 I saw a bunch of shows, but 85 and 86 is probably the height, and 87, the height of the touring that I did. I mean, I saw pretty much every show that wasn't in California. And 85 was such a fun year. You know, things were kind of, inside the band were looming a little darker, but us Deadheads who didn't know, or weren't in the know, were just having a great time with these amazing shows at these amazing, you know, outdoor venues during the summer. And one of them was Hershey, 1985. And a very special show for a lot of people. There was a Tom Thumb Blues that day. There was a bunch of Jerry songs in a row. Just like now in Oakland today, where it's pouring, it was pouring at that show. And, you know, this summer tour is about, you know, summer and outside. Well, summer also on the East Coast is about thunderstorms, and so they were rolling through. But it didn't dampen anybody's excitement for the show and the tour. And as uncomfortable as people could have been in the rain, people were laughing, they were dancing, people just didn't care. And we didn't care. We were having a great time. And when the show started and they kicked it off with Cold Rain and Snow, it was just like a little ha-ha to everybody. Like, yeah,
Right.
Yeah,
Yep.
so what?
So what? It's on. Still dancing. Did it rain the whole show, or was it a temperamental East Coast rain, like where it came and went?
It had been threatening in the hours before the show, and then it unleashed right before the show. And then it rained pretty good off and on during the show. There was a couple of breaks. I think toward the end of the show it kind of moved out, but right before the beginning of the show it was a nice downpour, and that's when the band came on and burst into that, and it was just perfect.
That's awesome. That is so fun. Well, let's go listen to this. And I'm looking at this track, and it's only about 5 minutes. So I think we might be 2 for 2 in here with playing the full version, because it's kind of hard to edit a 5-minute song. So I think we might end up just doing the whole thing on this one too. So I don't want to. I can't cut off like the last minute or so of it. So
I love it.
Let's do it. It's a hot version. Yeah, anything under 6 minutes, I usually end up spitting out the whole thing. So let's go and enjoy, and then we're going to come back, and we have one more adventure that takes you out of the East Coast, and let's go from there.
Sounds great.
Everyone enjoy a little Cold Rain and Snow. Lots of that going on around the U.S. in this January day.
the cold rain and snow. Down the stairs, over back her yellow hair. I'm going where those chilly winds don't go. Don't go. Going where those chilly winds don't go.
listening to Cold Rain and Snow in Hershey, Pennsylvania, and now you are going to go west, young man. So tell us a little bit about what went down in 1987.
Well, we discussed kind of getting into touring and touring on the East Coast, never seeing really any California shows. Well, that changed in late 1986 when I did fly out to some shows at Henry J. Kaiser, and then part of the New Year's Eve run, and then went back to New York after that New Year's Eve run and decided then and there I am going to move to the West Coast and move to San Francisco. It's time. And I was done with college pretty much. It was the summer of 1987, and we had our summer tour tickets, and I took off from New York, picked up my friends in Chicago, and we drove right to Red Rocks and saw every show on that tour. The Red Rocks was my first time, and it was like going to church. It was phenomenal the first time seeing a show at Red Rocks. And I believe it was 2 nights there, maybe it was 3 nights there. And then there was 2 shows in Telluride. And on tour, kind of the word was, oh, don't go to Telluride, don't have a ticket. It's going to be very, very harsh there. They're not letting anybody in. And it was just, kind of like people were putting the word out. Because the scene was starting to really grow, and there's a lot of people at the shows that didn't have tickets and were hanging out. And so...
And was that a much smaller venue, I would imagine, too? Because Red Rocks is pretty substantial.
It's substantial, but it's no, hockey arena.
Not
I mean,
stadium.
it's less than 20,000 people, probably.
But was Town Park Telluride? Sounds like that would have been pretty small, right?
Well, it sounded it. No idea. Telluride is in a box canyon. There's one way in and one way out. And so I think this word that spread on tour about, oh, don't go. If you don't have a ticket, it's going to be tough. I think that was spread by the dead, because you know what? When we got to Telluride, it was like a magical weekend. We went to the shows. There was nobody taking tickets. They were playing in the town park. You just walked into the park. And so I think they were just trying to get people who didn't have tickets not to come, because I don't think they were really going to be able to manage it there. So the shows at Telluride, which were the first show at Telluride, was my 100th Dead show. And it was also the harmonic convergence, whatever was going on with that at the time. And Baba Olatunji was having a drum circle in the morning of the shows. Kingfish was playing in the bars in town. It's an old western, town. Bill Graham was walking down the street. I mean, it was really like the Dead were enjoying it as much as anybody. So it was a very special show, and it was literally in the town square where the show was.
Yeah, Town Park. It's a town park, so I mean, teeny tiny, huh? I mean, that is so awesome.
Teeny tiny, and it was just a wonderful experience to be up in this amazingly beautiful place with all your friends and your Deadhead community and the band. And the shows were good. They're probably not the best shows on tour. Jerry even said from the stage, "Ooh, this altitude is killing me," But and it's up there. But the whole show and the Grateful Dead scene is not just about the music. It's the show. It's the people. It's the set list. It's the things that happen and the relationships that you have with people that you get to spend time with. And the song that I picked from these shows is, Far From Me is a Brent song, and I wanted to give a nod to Brent because Brent was such a big part of the Grateful Dead experience for me, and I love Brent. I know from listening to the music prior to my first show about Pigpen and about Keith Godchow and Tom Constantine, and I was aware, but I never would have a chance to see them live. And so my first experience was with Brent, and Brent caught my attention from the very first moment. I mean, he had that kind of Greg Allman vibe, his vocals, his way of playing. He had really leaned into the organ and the keyboards when he played, and it just blew me away. And so I wanted to give a little nod to Brent because for my Grateful Dead experience, he was a huge, huge part.
Yeah, right on. No, I couldn't agree with you more. And just really special. And that was, 87 was really probably like when he was really hitting his prime, where he was, writing and doing a lot of leads. And his playing as the close of the 80s was tremendous, and I've talked about this with others on podcasts, like almost a swan song when you listen to Without a Net. But you know, it was there was so much pain, and I probably in '87 it was a little clearer. It was probably before really all the shit hit the fan.
Yeah, you know, it was always a hot seat with the band, and Guy was with the band more than a keyboardist, but he was always kind of felt, you know, maybe like the new guy, and a lot of big shoes to fill. And who knows? You know, people have their demons, and he certainly had his. And but he made a lasting, lifelong impression on me. And that entire tour, Brent was ripping that entire tour. And so that's when I was making my way to move to the Bay Area, and that entire tour I landed in the Bay Area. And you know, Brent was as much responsible for that as Jerry, Bob, and everybody else.
Well, you know, in hindsight, 2020 and all of that, like in looking at things now, you know, oh gosh, 87, it's 30 years ago, right? It's 2017. And when I right, yeah, 30 years ago. And when you talk to people now, and when I talk to other Deadheads, which again, I get the pleasure of doing so much, Brent comes up a lot on this podcast, and Brent really was, it took him, it was one of those, you know, was the outcast or the new guy, but after the fact, you know, he was so important to so many people's experience, and really, I mean, I think he was definitely a post-mortem, like, oh my God, where would this, you know, this whole experience, this whole chunk of time have been without him? Because he definitely resonates with me, what you're saying, and from speaking to people on this podcast, I mean, I think that the feeling is out there with many.
It definitely is, and he meant a lot to a lot of people, and you can see by what, you know, tragically when he passed, you know, the band played on, and they did their best to fill the position with you know, Vince Welnick, competent, wonderful guy, and he had big shoes to fill. It's Bruce Hornsby, an amazing talent and artist in his own right. Big shoes to fill Brent's shoes, and you know, and Brent was really up and coming as a songwriter, really contributing Grateful Dead when in the Bay Area. I mean, you had him on the podcast a little while ago, but Scott Guberman is a great player who does a fine tribute to Brent. So I'm always glad to hear Scott play Brent's songs. So it's still alive and well, the spirit.
Oh yeah, no, again, very meaningful. And what did we play? We played We Can Run. Him playing, Scott playing Run. I think it was at the Berkeley Music Festival, and I played We Can Run on 2 weeks ago's podcast. So yeah, I mean, great stuff, you know. And in this podcast, the selection is the guest. Like, what do you want to hear? And yeah, people want to hear them. Great shit. It's good stuff. Well, let's go into this. Let's hear Far From Me. And I'm looking at my list, and it's 4 minutes and 21. So, I mean, I think we're just going to, like, we'll still do the companion only, but I think we're going to, like, roll out full versions of all the songs. And, you know, yeah, there's no way I'm cutting a 4-minute song. And one thing I will add as a little side commentary to you saying that they weren't feeling so good. What's interesting in looking at this concert and the timing is that there wasn't any long jams. I mean, I think like a 9-minute song was the longest one. All of the songs were 4, 5, 6, 7. They were all like more songs than long jams. So I bet that might have been indicative to how Jerry was feeling with that altitude.
Yeah, I think the altitude was definitely having an effect on Jerry, maybe some of the other band members. It's up there. It's pretty high.
They didn't bite off more than they could chew, though. No, they didn't. You know, like I'm looking here, and it's like 5 minutes, 6 minutes, 8 minutes. You know, so good for them, right? They're just like, let's just like jam a song out. But I can. It's interesting, as you said, that I was looking up at the time of the list, and true that, man. True that on what they must have been feeling that day. So let's listen to Far From Me, and then we're going to come back and we'll do a little goodbye, and everybody enjoy.
Sweet.
You say you want to try again. Bury down between the lines. Well, I have a better end in mind. It doesn't seem good. can't relate at all. It doesn't seem you really have to close your eyes to see. Oh, I know you don't need to be. You are so far from me. This time's the last time I won't say so long. So long. This song's my last song for you. It's just nothing here to hold on to, baby. Hold on to, nothing to hold on to. This time's the last time I won't say so long. This song's my last song for you. It's just nothing here to hold on to, baby. Hold on to, nothing to hold on to.
Well, back from listening to Far From Me, and Jeff, and I was looking a little bit deeper at this list to our conversation right before we left off, and about them being concise songs, and just to really put a fine point to it, drums was 7 minutes and space was 7 minutes. So
I think that's the legal minimum they're allowed.
I think it's the legal minimum. Absolutely, you could barely have time to go pee, right? I mean,
That's right.
That's not enough time. Well, right on. Well, I love your story. And then after this, you end to California. So you make it to the promised land, right?
I made it to the promised land and moved to San Francisco Sunset District, where I set myself down and had kids and a career and owned restaurants and launched myself. And actually met the love of my life, my wife Lindsay, and met in the Sunset District, and we've been together close to 9 years, and we got married just in May. So she's my partner in crime. She does the dinner and show gigs with me, and we see a ton of live music together, and that's our thing. We love it.
Well, good for you. Mazel to you. And I also was just saying, I'm so homesick. I think that little trip home, that weekend in Marin, my weekend at the Marin Lodge, my girlfriends came to visit me and said I seemed like a runaway. They were like, "Are you moving here?" I had my 3 nights there, and it was like my little apartment. Like I'm running away from my family out here in Massachusetts, and I think the Marin Lodge would be a good place to hide out for a little while.
I'm with you.
It's a great little bungalow spot up there. It had everything I needed. It was awesome. It was a great, little plug for anyone who's going to see some shows at, Terrapin or Sweetwater, and you're looking for a place to stay. I have no affiliation, but Marin Lodge, clean, nice, accommodating, and I think it was like $100 a night. So
there you go.
So there you go, Marin Lodge. Good spot to stay for your Marin vacation needs. But anyways, well, this was so fun, and you're heading off to New Orleans. So
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
good for you going up in January, so have fun.
Yeah, thank you. You know, seeing live music is what we do, and we're going to go see the Radiators reunion 3 nights at Tipitina's. We love New Orleans, and we love the Radiators, and a lot of crossover fans with the Radiators. So with Deadheads and Rats fans, Fishheads as they're called, not to be confused with the fans of Fish. The Radiator fans are called Fishheads, and looking forward to it. It's going to be a great weekend.
Well, safe travels. Have the best time, and I'm as excited to be friends and be in touch and see you out in June when I'm home. So you know we'll hopefully be in touch before, and we'll definitely get a chance to see each other next time I make it out to the Golden State.
Sounds great. Looking forward to it. Thanks a lot for having me on and for all the work you do on this podcast. It's awesome.
Oh, it's really fun. Thank you. All right, everyone. We'll be back next week. Bye.
Bye.
Stopping strangers, just a shake of hands. Everybody's playing in the heart of Goldland, heart of Goldland.